Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Idaho House Republicans podcast, where you get to learn a little bit more about the representatives that you have sent to the State House. And today we're very blessed to have Representative Vito Barbieri. And Vito represents Legislative District 3 in Seat A. He has been here and he's been elected for his 8th term. Welcome to the Idaho House Republican podcast, Vito Barbieri.
Thank you very much.
Hey, let me tell you a little about Representative Barbieri. He is an attorney. He's a law degree, and he got his bachelor's in JD from Western State University College of Law. He moved to the great state of Idaho in 2004. And the most important part of your life, of course, is that you are married to the wonderful Joy.
Yes.
And you have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. Yes. How good is that?
It's great. It's great. They all stay in Coeur d'Alene area, which is wonderful, and it's good to have them all there.
Representative Barbieri, Legislative District 3, that's who you serve.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit where Legislative District 3 is and what the people in Legislative District 3 care about legislatively.
I joke that Coeur d'Alene is a suburb of Dalton Gardens, where I live. Dalton Gardens, Hayden Lake, Hauser Lake, Rathdrum, that's the area that District 3 covers. And, they're very conservative, and it's wonderful to have, from my perspective, such a great conservative constituency. Mm-hmm. They are concerned very much about just government interference. They're very much concerned about making sure that their taxes are low, especially the property tax issue. And, of course, just overall more conservative values altogether, Christian conservative values.
So a small government that stays out of the way.
Tries to stay out of the way. I know there's things that they recognize have to be had. It's just a matter of how much it costs.
And they respect faith, family, and freedom.
They definitely do.
And this great state. And they want to preserve it. So Representative Barbieri, you're in your 8th term. So you are one of the more senior people in this august body. Tell people why you keep coming back for more.
Well, there's a lot involved in all of that. First and foremost, it's not something that you necessarily want to have happen. You think you're going to be here 10 years. My predecessor was 14 years.
Okay.
And I thought, that's way longer than I'm going to want to be there. But I was drafted by Phil Hart when my predecessor decided to retire. And so I was like, okay, well, I never thought about it before, but let's run. So now, 16 years later, there's always more to be done.
Right.
A lot of working in the legislature is relationships.
Yes.
A lot of it is understanding where the ropes are and then knowing when to pull them and then, learn by the seat of your pants and understand. So each session, each term, there's more to learn. There's more work to be done. And I have pretty much focused much of the last few years working on our power to regulate administrative rules, making sure that the agencies are actually implementing the rules pursuant to the statutes, the way we wanted them. And there's a lot there, a lot of intricacies in terms of our power to both reject and approve administrative rules. So I've spent a lot of time doing that lately, and I have a little bit more to do.
So let's talk about that topic specifically. Alex Adams, when he was working for the governor, was a legendary cutter of rules when he was at the everywhere he's gone, he's cut regulation. So that's one approach. The other thing is that a lot of times you'll write statute, the agency takes your statute and then misinterprets it, right?
Yes.
Doesn't have the intent of the legislation.
Yes.
So when you talk about what you want to do, is it involving both pools, not only reducing, but then making sure that your intent actually made it to the agencies? What is your intent?
The reduction of the number of rules is much tougher than it might appear when you start thinking about it. And one of the things the governor's done is he's cut words out, he's cut phrases out, but the substance still stays. And what I've tried to focus on is our power, those things that we have control over, whether a rule is a final rule, how it's applied, and how we review it. So it's the nuts and bolts, more or less, and that is controlled to a large extent by statute. And so when I first started looking at it, there was a question. At least 2 of the statutes were so conflicting. We're using different terminology to say the same things, and they didn't
mesh
cohesively. We had a meeting, Speaker Betke at the time, and LSO's chief, and another
Legislative Services Office,
Legislative
LSO.
Services Office chief, the director, and another lawyer, and we're all having this conversation, and they're both saying that they can't make heads or tails of our power and how it works. And so that was what set me off to say, I'm going to try and parse these statutes out and work with them. Well, it's not as easy as just saying, see, I fixed it.
Right.
You've got to show people how the dynamics of the problems we have now and how to try and fix those. Because there's things like, well, let's just use a temporary rule as an example. Temporary rule, we don't have any say about. It was meant for after we were out of session, excuse me, and the agency needs a rule. So they do a temporary rule, and then if it works, they'll come around the next session and they'll ask us to make it
pass
a
statute.
final rule. No, just make it a final rule.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And but in a sense, there's no real difference between an executive order and a temporary rule. They both can be done at the will of the administration with no real consultation with the legislature at all. Now, as an example, well, so anyway, that we're trying to get a hold of now. There's actually a bill that's coming across from the Senate that we'll be looking at soon that we've worked on last year, and we couldn't get it out, and I think we're going to be able to get that done this year. But just as an example of the rules and implementing the statutes, just before I got here, a story was told about a law we passed about foster children.
Okay.
And part of that was that there was only a certain number of foster kids that could be in a home.
Okay.
And after the legislature left, the rule said that number included the family's kids too. And when it came around to the next session, legislature said, no, that's not it. We meant just the number of foster kids. Those kids that are in the home, part of the family, are helping with them. So we're not counting them.
Right.
That actually went on for 2 years before the legislature had to change the statute to specifically say not including the family members. So it's those kinds of review that is so important. And Idaho is one of just a very couple of states that conclude that because rules implement statutes, it's within the legislature's power, not an executive power. Most of the states in the country believe it's an executive power, and therefore we have no say on it, which is also the case in the federal government.
Representative Barbieri, we're just, it's what I'm really enjoying as we do more and more of these is that people have a certain gifting, and they're actually coming and then using that gifting here in the State House. You as a lawyer,
yes, well, it does help.
It helps big time. So thank you for using that gifting to kind of clear things up, right?
Thank you.
Talk about, please, which committees on which you serve.
Presently, I'm on Rev and Tax, which just moved for the first time. I started my first 2 years when I started. I was on Rev and Tax for 2 years. Then Speaker Betke moved me over to State Affairs. Was there for 13 years. Happy there. Very dynamic committee.
Fun stuff.
And then I have been moved back with Speaker Moyle. I've been moved back to Rev and Tax. So I'm on Rev and Tax. I'm the chairman of Energy, Environment, and Technology, and I'm on business, and I've been on business the whole time I've been here.
And you are also one other thing. You are on the Ethics and House Policy.
I am on
as well.
Yes,
which we hope you never have to.
Yeah, there's always issues that come up. We're looking at changing that ethics rule as well. I've got a draft now. I think is finalized.
Oh yes, right.
Finalized.
Yeah. What are you thinking about?
The idea, first, Phil Hart was attacked my first term because a legislator reported from a newspaper article that he wasn't paying his taxes, which was false. And he spent the first 2 years that I was with, his seatmate, dealing with that. And so there was a major revamping of the ethics rule after that.
Okay.
And one of the things that they revamped was that it had to be a public hearing. After there was a determination that there may be fire where there was smoke, then there would be this public hearing, which you may have seen with the Von Ellinger case, also the Giddings case.
Yes.
That public trial never should have been public because it's an internal matter within the House. And if the House makes a determination that an ethics violation has occurred, then we decide what to do with that individual.
Right.
But to make it so that the AG was involved, to make it so that there was, in other words, shouldn't have the executive branch. It became
a bit of a spectacle.
The
That's your
executive
point.
branch shouldn't be involved in that, and it did become a spectacle.
Right.
And so anyway, we need to eliminate that. We need to make it an internal matter where the lawyers, as a lawyer, I know that we look at things differently. When we allow lawyers into an internal legislative matter, we just gum it up because we're thinking in terms of law, and all the House is thinking about is this an ethical breach?
Yes.
Not are they guilty?
Right.
Was there an ethical breach? So we want to eliminate attorneys. We want to eliminate the public spectacle. We want to make it an entirely internal matter and not controlled. For like another thing, the speaker has always appointed the chairman of committees.
That's right.
In this case, we'll follow Mason's, and the committee will choose the chairman. That way, there's no outside interference within the committee. And assuming we can get this through, we'll have a more, I think, a calmer, more deliberative
right.
process that won't be a spectacle and hit news. It'll hit news if there's a determination that the committee says, House, this is what we think you ought to do, and then it'll be public.
And is that, do you have to do statute for that, or is that a rule
No, it's a
that
rule.
you,
It's an internal rule.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
you
it's
have
just
to,
within the House.
majority, you have to
The
support
Senate,
that.
the Senate's not there.
Okay.
Just the House.
Perfect. Let's talk about, you are the chair of the Energy, Environment, and Technology Committee, and there's been some great, there's great potential for Idaho in nuclear energy.
Yes.
Last year in May, the president signed 4 executive orders to basically inspire a renaissance in nuclear energy. We have the Idaho National Lab, the only national lab that focuses on nuclear energy. Maybe talk about how you see nuclear energy in Idaho and what your committee can do to help Idaho realize its potential, if anything.
Another very complex issue, as most of the major issues are. First, 16 years ago, INL came and spoke, and they were only 10 years away from getting a finished product, and they have been saying that ever since. Excuse me. So when they came last, a few weeks ago, it's like I pointed that out. Well, this time it's different, they said, because of those executive orders that the president has put out there. So there's regulations now that are going to allow for, and they hope to have 3 separate
Right.
plants.
Critical. Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
critical by July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they'll be able to get there. But looking at the difficulty of getting the hardware and getting the actual thing built, let's get away from theory. Let's see it be built. Okay, that's great. If we can get those done by the July 4th, that will be wonderful. But we're still years away from being able to apply that. And as I've said before, in terms of the technology is still a steam engine. We're just heating it differently. And if we can't come to some other resource more quickly, then we're going to hit a wall. We're going to have brownouts. I don't know what is going to happen in terms of the meta site. They are supposed to have their own power, but they're not doing. They're on the grid now. They're not using their own power. And does that mean that rates are going to go up for consumers? I think so. And so if we're going to suddenly see these data centers draw power from residences, that's a problem. That's a difficult problem. Now we say, for instance, the Meta project, if they can get 2 gas power generators, then they can do it themselves,
Right.
5 megawatts away. But how long does that take before we can get the hardware here and get it set up? 3 to 5 years. So there's all these actual physical problems with getting this stuff done that as far as the population growth, as far as the development's concerned, is going to be very difficult to match getting the projects up and running to produce the energy and then the demand thereof. Very complex issue.
But thank God we actually have a framework and a federal administration that wants
And money.
this and
Yeah,
wants
and money,
and
yeah.
wants this to succeed.
Yeah.
Idaho is well positioned.
It is well positioned.
to take advantage of nuclear
Yes.
energy. And there is a concurrent resolution running in the Senate now, number 120, which would talk about our potentiality in the fuel cycle. So we'll just see how that works
And
out.
it's fascinating because they are developing ways to recycle the fuel.
Right.
Which who would have thunk? I mean, they
Right.
were burying it in the ground.
They
right?
wanted to get rid of it, right?
Yeah, and now they're able to recycle it. They're saying something like 80 to 90% of that is recyclable.
Right.
Just take 10% off and then store it above ground.
And, the French have been recycling fuel for over 50 years. And guess where that technology was developed?
I know.
The INL. And
Very
the INL has new ideas on how to recycle fuel. And it has recycled fuel, right? Because
Yes.
it did the
Yes.
Oklo plant
Yes.
and with HALU. which was from the experimental breeder reactor 2. So, I mean, we are in the game. We know how to play the game.
That we have INL there.
And let's go, right?
And they have enough property to be able to build and develop specific.
890 square miles.
That's a lot
of space. Before we came on, you want to talk about libel law.
Oh,
and what's on your mind with libel law? Do you want to do a bill on that, or what's your thought?
Several years ago, the Idaho, the Coeur d'Alene Press, put a headline out that was slanderous, that was defamatory to me. And I found a lawyer, and I sent them a complaint 6 months after they had done this, and they retracted. They said, oops, we didn't, that was wrong. We shouldn't have done that. That retraction made it so that there was no punitive damages available, even though they knew that they had deliberately lied, a defamatory, inflammatory statement.
And for 6 months, you were basically convicted in the public opinion.
By that time, so they're supposed to retract, and they're supposed to retract in the same manner but they didn't have to do that. It's just retraction alone. So what I wanted to say is, if it's libel per se, if it's slander per se, and that is a deliberate or reckless disregard of the truth, there shouldn't be a retraction available. And it's just a very small addition to the retraction bill. But the retraction bill now just says, if they retract, there's no punitives available. And I think that there should be the exception that if they are deliberate, malicious, grossly negligent, or intentionally negligent, that they should not be able to just say, okay, no harm, no foul.
Well, the other thing that's frustrating, Representative Barbieri, is that as a public figure, a lot of times people can say whatever they want about you, and because you're a public figure, you're treated differently.
Yes, if it's an opinion.
Talk about that reality.
Well, in this case, the paper said that I had called for the bombing of a facility. That is not opinion.
No.
Right? That is an outright accusation of a terrorist act, and that just can't stand. I settled with them for $100,000, and
well done.
What the heck?
Is that a bill yet or an RS?
No,
Where is it?
I've got it. It is not RS yet. It's drafted, and I've got to get white of the eyes and do some technical stuff to get it in RS.
And do you think that would happen this session? Or you
I
think
hope so. Yeah.
Okay. So. And that will go through Ways and Means, I imagine?
It'll start with Ways and Means.
Because it's late in this. Yeah. Late in the session.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk about House Bill 702 and the Universal Commercial Code and the impact on ownership of assets.
It is.
And I was reading that
Did you
bill.
look at that?
Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't quite understand all the eccentricities.
I
tell me about
came
that.
across an article in Zero Hedge, and I read the article, and there was a little documentary with a guy who had written a book on it. I think he called it The Great Taking. Anyway, so I went to Article 8 of the UCC and began to read it, and it was fascinating in the sense that, as a lawyer, it's all new terminology all of a sudden, and ownership is not part of that anywhere in the entire set of laws. And what it has to deal with is, if there's an insolvency, then the person in control of the paper has the power to liquidate it. So therefore, if I have stock in, let's say, General Motors, and General Motors goes belly up, and they have sold that stock or hypothecated that stock, I'm just a secured creditor. Actually, I become an unsecured creditor because I never had possession or control of that security. So it's the same with your bank account.
Interesting.
You no longer own the money in the bank. If the bank goes under and it's a major, it'd have to be a major calamity because the FDIC and the rest of the country, it secures, but there's only 2% of the amount in deposit. The FDIC can only cover 2% of it. So if there's a major downturn and there are defaults, the person in control of that security can liquidate it, and you are not in control of your bank account. The bank is in control. They own, even though that term is not used, that money, and you become an unsecured creditor.
Wow, of your own assets.
Of your own assets. It's not yours.
And that's what you like when you read into it. You're like, this is what this says. So what do you want to do about it?
I started talking to other legislators, and Tony Wisniewski took it and ran with it. He found an expert in Texas. He brought him out last week to testify. I think he was from North Dakota, but anyway, he was working in Texas. But Tony Wisniewski went and ran with this, got this thing done, and we have got it. I think it's on its way to the Senate.
So it's through
Or
the
maybe,
House.
No, maybe it needs to become on the House. I think we did just clear it from State Affairs.
Okay, so remind us what the bill will do in de facto what it does.
It will begin the process, because again, UCC is very complex, of returning ownership to the individual who should have control, the owner of the security, rather than if it's been borrowed against the individual that's holding the control of the security.
Now, let me talk about, so the Universal Commercial Code, is that something that literally is universal? It's a nationwide thing, and you are spotting a weakness in it and then enhancing it in Idaho specifically? Or are you then going to say, hey, Congressman Fulcher, Simpson, Crapo, Rich, change it nationally? How does that work?
It's a state.
Uniform
commercial codes in every state has been changed to this model.
Oh, okay.
It's a uniform code. So that means every state has had this model and changed it to this model. And that was one of the questions in committee is, well, which law is going to prevail if the security is controlled by somebody out of state? And that's one of the things that Tony's built into this, is that the Idaho law prevails if the individual who originally purchased the security is in Idaho.
That's a very cool bill.
Very powerful.
So this just shows you where the expertise of Representative Barbieri being a lawyer and the passion of Representative Wisniewski
Yes.
to do what he's done combines together and could really, save us. Like when things are tight, you need your assets. And if they're gone, that would be
It's
horrific.
going to be powerful if we can get it through the Senate as
Well
well.
done. Well
Thank you.
done.
Thank you.
Let's talk about you wanted to talk about the administrative rules review. Did we get through everything you wanted to talk about on that
There's some
topic?
subtleties there, but really there's no reason to go too much detail.
Okay, I want to talk about rev and tax a little bit because you had some background on that. You're back. Idaho is legendary for its own tax cuts. We've done $6 billion of tax cuts over the last 5 years. The big, beautiful bill has come in this year. $155 million is what we're estimating will be the tax cuts to Idahoans for fiscal year 26. $175 million for fiscal year 27. But as you know, we like to do our own tax cuts here in Idaho. What's the long-term tax policy that you see past the big, beautiful bill being obviously absorbed in this year's budget? Probably not much for this year's budget, but how do you see it going forward in terms of
I think we're
tax policy?
We're fortunate to have Speaker Moyle, who really has done a lot.
That's his passion.
He's been on in the Rev and Tax Committee forever. And he will continue, I think, to advocate for less taxes for the taxpayer will keep more money in their pockets. So what has to happen now is that Republican concept. We've got to figure out a way to, as painlessly as possible, shrink the executive branch. We've got to shrink that. I mean, as it is, the legislature itself is something like 1/600th of the entire budget. The legislative branch is a junior branch. We shouldn't be. We should be the most powerful. So we've got to be able to, as painlessly as possible, begin to shrink back some of these executive agencies. Like, for instance, they may come in and say, our cars are at 100,000 miles. We need new cars. Okay, well, maybe in times of stress, we should take them to when they break. Maybe we should drive them until they're
200,000 miles.
I don't know. I don't know what the number is, but we've got to figure out a way to stretch that dollar and not shrink the ability of the agencies to do their job, but to shrink the cost of doing that. And if I were in business, I am in business, but being in business, I have to figure out where am I going to trim if I'm going to stay in business. And I think that, not saying that government is business, but they need to think along those same lines.
Let me ask you a question. So the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee really deals with the spending, right? And the Revenue and Taxation Committee is more of the revenue side, the taxation side. How does JFAC and the Revenue and Taxation Committee, if at all, work together in the beginning stages to set the stage for the entire budget process? Are you guys involved at all?
I don't believe we are. And now I'm back in the Rev and Tax Committee now, and I don't see that. As a matter of fact, one of the things that
do you think you should be?
Well, I think we should be. I think that all of the germane committees should be closer to the budgets of the agencies that they're not under them, but they control. Health and welfare. They should have some idea of the germane committees of what the budgets are going to be and have a say in that. Not necessarily a final say, but be able to advise JFAC in terms of this is what we see from the policy side,
Right.
and therefore that
Because
would be
that's your
reflected.
expertise.
Yeah, that would be what. And so we're working toward that. It's been segregated. It's been segregated for decades, and so we're trying to figure out a way that we can get without it becoming too cumbersome, too time consuming. And that's what JFAC has always said. Oh, we don't have time. We don't have time. But there's got to be a way that we can begin to integrate the germane committees with those aspects of the budget that JFAC is dealing with so that we're working more closely together. Now, the JFAC committee they don't even have to RS it. They just send us the budget.
You know, it's interesting in an earlier podcast, and I can't remember which representative said this, but they had proposed that what should happen is before the whole JFAC process begins and the different agencies go to JFAC for their presentations, that if, for example, the health and welfare, all the ones that would deal with health and welfare, they would actually present their budget and their points of view to that germane committee first, get feedback from that committee, and then make that presentation to JFAC. That's something it sounds like philosophically you would agree with.
Yes, there's the devil's in the details in terms of procedure and process.
Right.
But yes, somewhere along those lines, the germane committees become involved in the process of budgeting.
Well, perfect. Hey, we thank you very much for joining us on the Idaho House Republicans podcast. And as we always say before we sign off, God bless the great state of Idaho. And again, thank you, Representative Vito Barbieri, who represents Legislative District 3 in his 8th term. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sunrise on the Snake River Plain, red, white, and blue in the window pane. Work boots dusty from yesterday, but we're back at it the Idaho way.